welcome in. It is Big Ten Today. We are presented by Rally House, the official team shop of the Big Ten. Your city, your house, Rally House. And look who is in the house today. It is Jake Butt. It's Thursday. Last Thursday, we had games. This Thursday, we just have anticipation and a lot of it.
We've been anticipating this Texas-Michigan game going on a few years now. Big noon kickoff, Gus, Joel, two of the premier programs, a top 10 matchup. It'll reveal a lot. You know, I mean, Michigan's replacing we saw the offenses, they introduced a ton of new pieces. This is one of those games that will reveal a ton.
I'm fascinated by this game. I think we're going to learn, as you said, a lot. I mean, we'll learn a lot about Texas, too. I'm more interested in what we'll learn about Michigan and whether or not they are legitimately in a position to compete on the national stage again this year for a national championship. Yeah. I think we know they're the kind of team that could be in the college football playoff, no doubt. Have they reloaded to the extent that they can compete with a team like this? It's the big game. It's our big story as well. Number 10, Michigan, hosting third-ranked Texas. Amazingly, it is just the second ever meeting between these two storied programs. In the first in the regular season, they played an epic Rose Bowl 20 years ago. Two of the 5 winningest programs in the history of the sport. It's Big Ten versus SEC, and the Wolverines well aware they're in for a battle.
Next step now for Michigan. You've got Texas coming in, and they look strong. It's a team that was in the college football playoff last year.
I believe that game right there is a big test for our season.
And here come the defending champion Wolverines.
Great opportunity for our team to, not just be tested, but it's not a challenge, but an opportunity for us to go show us who we are against a really good team. Another team that was in the college football playoff last year, who obviously returned their quarterback, returned some production, and got some production. So we're just stoked and ready.
Picked off, Makari Page.
The opportunity shows us who we are early on in the season. So I feel like that game, being the second game of the year for us, it should be a lot of fun and a great opportunity for us.
Donovan Edwards, here's the Don, down the sideline, touchdown Wolverines.
We're going to take the same approach as it will be Fresno State or Texas or, every other game that we play. We're going to come in with the same approach and the same mindset.
It's awesome, another great opportunity. That's what this season's all about, and it'd be awesome to put a statement out there to show that Michigan football is and always will be.
So that kind of sets the scene for us, Jake. Let's focus on Michigan and week one. The defense played great, and I think we expected that they would be really good defensively this year with all the star power they have back, and that proved out at least in week one. The issue was the offense. What needs to happen offensively for them to be competitive in this game and to win this game, frankly?
Everyone has to step their game up. Everyone has to be at their best. But, that's true in this type of matchup. That's what makes these fun. Each team, each individual has a chance to play at their best, and then that'll give you an opportunity to win. And I look at the Fresno State film, and certainly there was some left to be desired. And you look at, let's start with Davis Warren's statistics. There's a few plays that were opportunities, like forks in the road. His interception to Frederick Moore, that's the correct read. He was open. If that ball gets up earlier and if that ball gets placed out and to the left a little bit more, all of a sudden that's a 50-yard touchdown. There was a double move that Tyler Morris ran. He won, but he was jogging out of his break. All of a sudden, that's an incompletion. So then you're looking at it, and if those two went a little bit differently, Davis Warren has 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0. Think about the conversation we would be having, how different that would be. But now you're playing Texas, and it can't be about what might happen. It now has to happen. So across the board, everyone has to be better. I also look at the offensive line, and what was a strength for Michigan is in the past few years, they had 5 individuals that played as one. They were one unit, always on the same page. Yeah. Last week, I saw 2 guys doing one thing, 3 guys doing it. They have got to get on the same page. They're rotating centers. If Michigan wants to win this game, you talk about the defense, it'll most likely be a lower scoring game, but they got to control the ball offensively, starts with the run game.
That was really, I think, the most concerning part of it was their bread and butter, as we know, has been the run game. When they've taken shots offensively, certainly last year with JJ, they were able to hit him downfield, but this was not a team that was taking a high volume of deep shots. They were a team that liked to control the ball and play really good defense. The issue is if you're going to control the ball, first of all, you need a better performance from Donovan Edwards. I mean, Khalil Mullings looked like the number one back in that game. But to your point, it's hard to run the ball effectively if the holes aren't there.
And the shots were off of play action, which goes back again to running the ball. Now, what do we know about Donovan Edwards? In the biggest game, he shows up,
great.
right? So, let's throw that last week out. We know they call him Big Game Don. You'd expect him to have a big game. But I do think that's an interesting dynamic because Khalil Mullings and Donovan Edwards have different skill sets. Mullings reminds me a ton of Hassan Haskins. Both of them came in as linebackers. Both of them, switch positions to running back, and he still has that angry running that a linebacker you'd expect from a linebacker.
He'll run you over. Edwards will run
right
past
through you.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I wonder, and I do look at it. I say, the offensive system. I don't even think they use 60% of what they'll use versus Texas this week. So that's an adjustment. And Colston Loveland showed up big. I mean, Davis Warren was comfortable looking to him in the big. Texas is going to take away Colston Loveland. So now these other guys have to step up. If Texas is going to commit more resources to Colston, other guys got to step up.
Hey, real quick, I want to turn it to the other side of the ball because Michigan's defense did play fabulously. Texas, we know they have a huge edge at quarterback, and for no other reason than experience of Quinn Ewers versus Davis Warren or if Alex Orji comes in. But Texas is down 2 running backs for this season. I mean, they have some offensive challenges as well. They're really good on the offensive line. But what do you think about that matchup, Michigan's defense, and perhaps its ability to dictate this game a little bit and take some of the pressure off of Michigan's offense?
They have to. And they got great speed outside. So the strength of Texas is going to be throwing the football. And what we saw week 1 versus Fresno State was Wink Martindale deciding to send a lot of pressure. And I think that game plan has to change this week. You mentioned the running backs. Okay, now we hear about the front 4 and the 2 linebackers. Those guys have to win without help. They have to shut down the run by themselves, win first and second down. And I think this week there should be more 2-high shells to help the corners and slow down that vertical passing attack. All of a sudden, let's see this Michigan D-line get after Quinn Ewers. That's got to be the key. Can they get to Quinn Ewers before he gets the ball out to his playmakers? That is a key element in this game.
So that's a game with college football playoff implications. I don't think there's any doubt about it for both teams. I would not say the same, at least on paper, of Nebraska and Colorado. You never know. I think there's a hope in Lincoln that perhaps this team becomes a dark horse with a really good start and gets themselves into that conversation. They would have to win this game for that to happen. This is a series Nebraska has owned historically. They're old Big 8 and Big 12 rivals with Colorado, more than twice as many wins as the Buffs in the head-to-head. Of course, they used to play every year, just the 4th meeting since 2010. It's Colorado which has had its way recently, winning each of the last 3 matchups. They have never won 4 in a row. It's a matchup of second-year coaches, Deion Sanders and Matt Rule.
I don't think there's any secrets here about what they're capable of. You know, they've got dynamic playmakers. They've rebuilt the offensive line. They're big, they're physical, and defensively, you know, they play man coverage. They pressured a bunch in the second half, you know, to slow down North Dakota State, and they play really, really hard. I mean, Warren Sapp's their D-line coach. You know, they play really hard up front, so they fly around. So they've got really good players, and they've got a really well thought out scheme and well coached team.
You attack weaknesses. I don't know if you attack inexperience. If that's a weakness, so be it. But the kid made some darn good throws, some pretty good plays. They did some consistent things that we knew they would do within their offense. Phenomenal game. I mean, it started out, you know, back and forth a little bit, but they went ahead and did what they needed to do. But I love what he showed in his first college game ever.
Deion Sanders obviously talking about Raiola at quarterback there for Nebraska. To me, this game is about proof of concept for Nebraska, right? Again, maybe it does end up having CFP implications. We don't know. But what it does have is major implications for the fan base, right? This notion that, hey, Colorado's second-year coach, we're a second-year coach, didn't go well last year in Boulder. They had all this momentum and craziness and hype surrounding them. But now it's a year later, and Nebraska got its quarterback in Raiola, and they feel like they're ready to take that next step. And I feel like for the fan base, again, you could win every other game except for this one. But this one just feels like you got to win it to prove that you're headed in the right direction.
And it's the importance of winning this game, and it's true for both teams. And that's why I find, for the first team to make a mistake in this game, how do they overcome that? Because both of these programs have high expectations, to your point, this season. Colorado has talked about how they're the Super Bowl on everyone's schedule. They're setting those expectations. We expect to see a year 2 jump in the Matt Rule era, and especially after the way Raiola played last week. But mistakes will get made, and how does each team respond? And I look at, when you talk about proof of concept, last year's game was a perfect example because the slow down and explosive Colorado offense, and Shedeur Sanders is a top 10 pick. You have to win in the trenches. You have to control the ball offensively, and the run game looked really explosive last week. And then your defensive line has to get to the quarterback, which they did last year. I think they had 8 sacks, 58 yards net rushing. Yeah. But what killed them, they had 4 turnovers. So it's the same recipe as it's always been. I just feel a lot more confident that Raiola isn't going to turn the ball away, even though he's a young freshman.
That, to me, is the key in this game because it does feel like Nebraska ought to be able to move the ball. Their defense is their strength. Look, Shedeur Sanders threw for more yards than a quarterback in the power conferences. In the opener, he's tremendous. Hunter is great. He seems to push off on a lot of those 50-50 balls.
I pushed off too, as long as they don't call it.
He got the calls, yeah, absolutely. But he's fabulous. He might be the best player in America. He certainly is talented on both sides of the ball. Horn's a really good wide receiver. They're going to put up points and yards. I think for Nebraska, it's do you not turn the ball over? Because Colorado, there are only 3 teams that gave up more yards per game than Colorado did last year. This is a porous defense, but they forced turnovers. They forced the 3rd most in the Pac-12 a season ago. Obviously, they've changed conferences with the dissolution of the Pac-12, but the concept remains like there's risk and reward there. You're going to be able to gash them, but you cannot hand them the ball back with that explosive offense.
And that's why this is such a perfect game for Nebraska, a benchmark to find out where they are. I know it's been emphasized. It's been emphasized all spring. I see Matt Rule sending guys on a lap in practice if they turn the ball. So it's been emphasized and talked about consistently. And I really do believe this, that Nebraska has taken more strides as a team than Colorado if they avoid giving the ball away. So if Nebraska can be okay punting the ball and avoiding those turnovers, I think they can control this game and really slow down Colorado. But a lot of that falls on the shoulders of Raiola. You just listen to that kid talk in press conferences. You listen to his teammates talk about him. It's hard for me to not buy into him. It's those subtle cues and the way he carried himself in the game last week in his first start in a big moment. He looked poised. He's making checks at the line of scrimmage, making 2 checks at the line of scrimmage, step up into the pocket and ripping a sidearm throw, just like Pat Mahomes, just like I believe it's his godfather, Matthew Stafford, too. He's put some amazing things on tape, and now, again, in the biggest moment, that's when your biggest players need to be at their best. That's what he's going to do this weekend.
It is going to be a big moment. They're honoring the '94 national championship team at Nebraska, hearkening back to those glory days. It'll be the 398th straight sellout. It just feels like this fan base is waiting to explode. And one weekend, little shuffling in Joel Klatt's rankings. Georgia leapfrogging Ohio State. The Bucks moved from 1 to 2. Oregon was 4. Now they're not in his top 9. Penn State and Michigan both making minor moves. Wolverines dropping a few spots. Penn State made a slight move up after winning in Morgantown. And Fox Sports lead game analyst Joel Klatt joins us now for our weekly visit. Joel, I got to say, from where I sit, I thought USC was the most impressive Big Ten team in week 1. The defense was vastly improved. Quarterback play was tremendous. Wide receivers were absolutely outstanding. They tackled extremely well. What were your biggest takeaways from the Trojans' win over LSU?
Well, a couple of things. All of those things that you just said, just for them. Yes, their defense was a vast improvement over what we saw a year ago and in previous seasons, really since Lincoln Riley became a head coach dating back to Oklahoma. D'Anton Lynn, their defensive coordinator, looks like he's fixed this thing right away. And this was not an offense that was supposed to struggle at LSU. I understand that they're replacing a lot of players, and yeah, they're probably going to get better. But remember, they got a couple of tackles that a lot of us who work in the draft arena, Rev, we think that those tackles could be first-round players. So this was not a light or bad offensive line that front seven was playing so physical against, in particular late in that game. I thought that Miller Moss was terrific. There's no doubt, but you can expect that from a Lincoln Riley quarterback. It doesn't matter who's been his quarterback. They've been terrific dating back to his time even as a coordinator. I think that the bigger point about USC is that they beat a team from the SEC that was similar to them in the preseason, thought to be about 4 or 5 in that range. And then what USC is, they kind of announced to the Big Ten, like, hey, you're going to have to deal with us at the top level. And I think that's a huge development. When you look at some of these schedules, you look at now all of a sudden that Penn State game with Penn State going to USC becomes an absolute monster. You look at that schedule that I think is actually favorable for USC and who they avoid. And then when they get Michigan, getting to play them in September as Michigan's continuing to try to get their feet wet, developing in a new quarterback and a new head coach and 2 new coordinators. So all of a sudden, USC's schedule is favorable, their defense is solid, and their quarterback looks real, and you can legitimately say, yeah, this team is going to be there and probably has an inside track on a playoff berth, if not a spot in the Big Ten championship game. And you can infer that all based on that 1 win over LSU.
You mentioned Penn State. I think their schedule gets really favorable now, too. They don't play a road game until October 12th when they go to USC.
That's
that
right.
game you were talking about. You had them. You were front and center for that game, the long weather delay, obviously in Morgantown. But really clicked the big plays under Andy Kotelnicki. It looked like a very different offense from what we saw a season ago. I know week 1 is about these broad, sweeping conclusions from very minimal actual evidence, but is it your feeling, based on what you saw, that perhaps this offense has turned the corner here?
Okay, so yes and no.
Okay, explain.
Okay, and yeah, exactly. It needs further explanation. I think that you'll agree with what I'm about to say, but this offense did things that we did not see them do a year ago. Okay, namely, like, for instance, Nick Singleton, as a true freshman in 22, had 7 runs of 40 or more yards. That led college football, led the FBS. And he did not have 1 last year. A big goose egg, Rev, and he's a big play guy. He's a home run hitter. And what did we see against West Virginia? A 40-yard touchdown run. That is a huge development for them to try to get that explosiveness back. Another number. Drew Aller was 124th in the country in terms of air yards per attempt in a quarterback sense, okay? And it was right around 7.5. Well, you look at what Kansas was under Andy Kotelnicki, and regardless of quarterback, they were about 11 yards, air yards per attempt. So a vast difference, and they would sit in the top 10 in college football. What do we see from Drew Aller? Pushing the ball down the field. And I thought the evidence of their aggressiveness was right before the half. That was a time that let's face it, let's be honest. I was kind of expecting Penn State to just almost kneel on it, run out the clock, and take their lead into halftime. And they didn't do that. And they took a shot down the field, and I think that was the aggressive nature of Andy Kotelnicki. So that's the yes part. So now let's get to the no part. Why then is it no, Joel? Well, it wasn't any different. Because they did a similar thing to West Virginia last year in their first game, and then it started to fall apart. Now, I don't expect that to be the case, but you at least have to put that forth and say, we saw Drew Aller throw the ball down the field against West Virginia, and then they stopped doing that. And this fact that the only teams that they actually struggle with are Michigan and Ohio State. If you look at their regular season over the last 2 years, you'll see a team that is 20-0 against all teams not named Michigan and Ohio State. So, Rev, as good as it was, Penn State still remain to be seen because they've got to do it against that upper echelon talent like USC or Ohio State left on their schedule.
Yeah, they get that huge Ohio State game. That game, of course, in State College, first weekend in November. That one should be phenomenal. Oregon, we've had the Oregon-Ohio State game circled early on in the year as well. That one coming in October. Oregon did not look ready for that game in week 1, Joel. They were not impressive.
They didn't look ready for Idaho.
No,
I mean,
really
like
didn't.
much less of that game. My goodness.
What did you make of that? We had this game on the Big Ten Network. I think we were all watching and just kept thinking at some point Oregon was just going to hit them with a couple big plays and just blow this game open, and they never did. What did you make of Oregon's struggles?
Well, first of all, can I give a shout out? I know both of these guys, but I thought Guy Haberman and Yogi Roth did an exceptional job on that game.
Phenomenal.
Because, they didn't allow the Idaho nature of that to shadow their broadcast, and I thought they did a great broadcast of a really good college football game. So I would just say that, and I don't normally throw out analysis or thoughts on broadcasts, but I thought those two did a great job for obvious reasons, right? It's like stones in glass houses. Now, let me tell you why I was alarmed with Oregon. And Rev, it has to do with their offensive line. And I think all of us say, the offensive line didn't play very well. And I'm sure that, you've brought up the numbers. 5 of their 8 penalties offensively. They ran the ball for under 3 yards per carry against Idaho from the FCS. They give up 3 sacks, which maybe in your mind you're like, well, that's not a ton. 3 sacks, you can overcome that. They give up 5 all last season. All last season, Rev. So 3 to Idaho from the FCS should be like panic, throughout the building. If I'm Dan Lanning, I am fire and brimstone this week in terms of my expectation about the effort and the discipline and the detail that my team plays with, because they're about to face a team in Boise State that they've never beat. They're 0-3 against Boise State all time. You think those guys aren't going to be ready to play? Ashton Genty, after running for somewhere just south of 1 million yards in the first game and 6 touchdowns, they're going to be ready to go.
Yeah.
And we'll see if Oregon really is who we thought they were going to be, which is a team that was going to play at the top end of college football, be physical up front with Dan Lanning as the shining star, as a young coach, all those things. And it's you hate to say it this way, but it's Oregon had the whole preseason show on YouTube and all this stuff. And it's I'm always reminded about that line from Gladiator. It's the time for honoring yourself is over. And you got to put up and shut up. And that's what this season is going to turn into for Oregon.
I'm with you. It's a really interesting game coming up against Boise State. I'm fascinated to see how Oregon responds. They clearly were, all you have to do is listen to Dan Lanning in the postgame. They were not pleased with the way that it went down. He said that nor should they be, in no uncertain terms. I want to fast forward to this week a little bit. Nebraska was great in the opener. Dylan Raiola was everything we hoped he would be. That was UTEP. Now they got Colorado coming up this week. You know this rivalry very well. Ooh. You played in this rivalry. Colorado handed it to them last year, really pulled away late in that game. So you've got the animosity between these two programs. You have all the hype that Colorado got last year under Deion Sanders with what turned out to be not a very good team in terms of a 1-loss record. You get the superstars coming in on Colorado's side. You get all the hype surrounding Raiola. What's it going to take for Nebraska to win this game?
So knowing that this was a bit like a big studio day, I record a podcast today and go on Colin's show. Obviously, I come on this show, which I love being on with you, Rev. And I thought to myself, I know I'm going to be asked about this game, so what's the best way that I can try to appear objective? And I was like, wear the most red shirt that I own, and this is it. It's like a kind of a salmon, like this soft red.
Not a pure red. No.
Well, of course not. I do not own a pure red shirt because of Nebraska. You have to understand, I grew up 20 minutes south of Boulder, Colorado. Right. This is the game of my childhood, was Nebraska, Colorado. In fact, I owe this rivalry a lot, not only because I played in it and I love it, but the game in 2001, the 62-36 win that Colorado beat number 1 Nebraska and Eric Crouch, I was at that game as a fan, and that game was a turning point in my life because I was complaining about playing minor league baseball and how much I hated it, and I was kind of floundering, and my best friend in the world, his name's Scott Stalker, looked at me and was like, well, then just come here. And I was like, you know what? That sounds like a really good idea. So that was kind of the first time that I had thought that maybe baseball wasn't going to be it and I should go to school. Now we get into this game. This game, they're saying all the right things, at least the quarterbacks and the coaches, but there is no love lost here, going back years and years and years, because Colorado, in large part, built their program under Bill McCartney by pointing at Tom Osborne and the Nebraska Cornhuskers and saying that's going to be the standard that we're going to take down. Now, Matt Rule is trying to rebuild this program and doing an exceptional job of it. If you just look at the two rosters and the teams and the way they play and the details with which they play, Nebraska is the better team. The problem is that Colorado has the better top-end players. Shedeur Sanders is excellent. I mean, I think we all admit that and know that. Travis Hunter probably is the best non-quarterback in college football. And so they are the great equalizer. I know the line is 7.5, and Nebraska is at home, and that place is going to be electric, but you still have to deal with Travis Hunter. Number 12 might put a cape on his back and get 2 picks and go for 150 catching the football, and then all of a sudden you're in trouble if you're Nebraska. If I'm handicapping this, Nebraska is the better team. They have a quarterback that I think is going to be a great player, but they don't even need him to be great. Remember, and Rev, I'm sure you know this, like they lost those field goal games last year. I think there was 4 of them when they had 17 turnovers. 14 were by the quarterback. They don't need Raiola to be great. He doesn't have to be their savior. He needs to be a net positive for Nebraska, not a net negative. And they will turn into an 8, 9, 10 win team this year. Remains to be seen if they win this one. If they can beat Colorado, they're going to go into Ohio State as an undefeated.
It's very diplomatic. I'm really impressed with the way that you handled that. I'm going to ask you here at the end about the matchup that you're going to be calling the big noon game. It's the only top 10 game in the country coming up this weekend.
I'm so long-winded on everything else, and it's like we haven't even talked Michigan, Texas.
Let's talk a little bit about Michigan, Texas. Look, whether or not it's fair or unfair, look, Michigan's the defending national champ. There's going to be heightened expectations on them. They lost a ton. They lost their head coach. They lost 8 offensive players alone to the NFL draft, including a first-round quarterback. And now all of a sudden, everyone's going to say, okay, well, how do they measure up with Texas? Pretty early in the year to have to deal with a team as good as the Horns are. But give us a sense. I mean, I know you study a ton of tape. Like, how do they match up? Is there an area where Michigan has an advantage? We know how good their defense is. What would it take here for Michigan to pull what I think would be a pretty significant upset?
Yeah, so first off, Texas this year reminds me a lot of Michigan last year, Rev. Lost in the semis the previous year, and they bring a bunch of experience, including a lot of experienced offensive linemen back. They're tough at the line of scrimmage. They've got speed on the outside. They've got talent, and they've got a culture. I think that's what people maybe don't pay attention to with Steve Sarkisian and the Texas Longhorns, is that they've got a really great culture in their building, and that has taken hold. And now you've got guys that have passed it down, and this is no longer Sarkisian trying to build a culture as much as it is entrenched in what they do, and they're going to bring an experienced, talented, and fast team with a good quarterback up to Ann Arbor. That reminds me a lot of Michigan last year. It just does. Michigan's advantage in this game is the fact that Texas defensively is still trying to break in some of these defensive linemen. They lose Tavondre Sweat, these guys up front that were really good up front and really the bell cows of that defense. And Michigan, at least historically, would think that they can run the football and lean on a new defensive line. Now, I was not overly impressed in the first half with the way that the offensive line of Michigan played. They played way too high. That's not the leverage that I'm used to seeing out of Michigan, just watching the film. But that's where they've got to play well. Because in my estimation, Michigan has to protect their own defense. As good as their defense is, as good as the defensive tackles are, Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, as good as Will Johnson is on the outside, they need to protect that defense, because if Sarkisian gets 65, 70, 75 bites at the apple, they're going to score a lot of points. They just will. There's too much speed and experience on that side. So Michigan has to limit the number of snaps, and they do that by being able to run the football. If they can run the football and limit Texas to 55 or fewer snaps, they're going to have a chance to win in the end, because as you know, and as I always talk about, Michigan is the great boa constrictor. They want to just take you and just squeeze you, and then eventually they suffocate you in the late third quarter and early fourth quarter. And it just remains to be seen if they can do that against a team that is this talented and experienced and tough at the line of scrimmage.
Well, it should be a great game. We look forward to the call coming up. Big noon on Saturday. Joel, always appreciate it. I look forward to this segment every week. Thanks a lot for your time.
Same. You bet, Rev. Have a good one, bud.
Back with Jake Butt. They got another good one in Eugene, Oregon coming up. We were talking about this a little bit with Joel, the matchup with Boise State. Ashton Jeanty, he ran for 6 touchdowns in their win over Georgia Southern. They scored 56 points in that game. I'm going to score 56 against Oregon's defense. We know how good they are. The real concern for the Ducks is offensively. How concerned are you about what we saw from Oregon, and how equipped do you think they are to put that in the rearview mirror?
I'm not concerned. There was a number of teams that kind of looked a little shaky, especially early. It's week one,
Right.
but you always hear the phrase, the biggest jump is between week one and week two, and that's what I would expect to see. I was shocked because I look at Oregon with 2 great tackles, maybe 2 first-round picks that out there at the edge. I know they're replacing their center, but we talk about the new 4 teams joining the Big Ten. You have to win in the trenches. And 2.9 yards per carry versus Idaho, that's not going to cut it. Right. So you got to go back and watch the tape. You got to look at it and say, man, I listened to Dylan Gabriel talk. All the mistakes were self-inflicted, which is a positive. But they need to now correct it and put it on tape. I don't think you can. The recipe for success should be throwing the ball 49 times again this week.
This is a team you should be able to gash a little bit, because I know they scored 56. They also gave
They should be able to
45.
gash a ton of teams.
No,
I mean, they
I
are
know.
absolutely loaded.
But I'm saying this is a team that gave up 45 points
Yeah.
against a team that is considered middle of the road at best in the Sun Belt.
Yes.
So we shall see. Could be a track meet. It's perhaps fitting that we showed Hayward Field there.
There you
because
go.
Could be a track meet in Eugene. Cyhawk, Iowa, and Iowa State. This is a really good test to me for Iowa. There was a lot of excitement about the Hawkeyes offense in week one, and I get it. Right? They scored 40 points in the second half in particular. Cade McNamara looked great. Iowa State, there's excitement around this Cyclones team coming into this year. They returned as much experience as anyone in the country. We know about the nature of this rivalry. Are you buying into Iowa's offense one week in?
I am, and I know it was a tale of 2 halves last week, but we can't forget Kirk Ferentz isn't on the sideline. Again, it's week one, but as the game went on, they settled in, and I think what's important to remember is you have a healthy Cade McNamara. It was great to see him step up in the pocket and scramble, testing out those wheels a little bit. You got a healthy Luke Lachey, who's one of the best tight ends in the conference. They got him involved. And then they found a diamond in the rough in Reese Vanderzee. I think he was not even a top 1,000 recruit in high school football, right? He was a quarterback, and here he is at 6'4". Cade felt very comfortable throwing him the ball, and I get the opponent, but things on tape translate. Last year, they had trouble catching the ball at times. Last time, they had trouble imposing their will and being on the same page as an offensive line. It looked to me like fundamentally they had cleaned some things up offensively, which they'll need to carry over this week. Iowa State, thin at linebacker, lost a few guys there. They got to take advantage of that.
Iowa State does have a lot of talent offensively. Rocco Becht is an underrated quarterback, but man, Iowa's defense appeared to be in midseason form.
And he struggled last year versus this. This defense is even better than last year, and they're back to forcing turnovers again, which is always tough.
No, they're elite. I'm really interested in Illinois and Kansas. I just think this is one of those sneaky games that maybe people aren't talking about all that much, and they should be. I loved Illinois in week one. Again, you consider the opponent. I know, Eastern Illinois. But to me, the run game, Caden Fagan, Aiden Lawfrey, those guys are going to be tough to stop. Yeah. That was where they had a big drop-off last year. Fagan got injured as a freshman. It felt like Luke Altmaier was in more control. But to me, the questions about Illinois were about the defense coming into this year. Kansas is going to test you. Kansas had its way with Illinois last year when they played in Lawrence. To me, huge test against the Jayhawks.
Everything you wanted to see from Illinois week one, they showed. And I understand the opponent, I understand the challenge this week. But they checked every box. You mentioned the offense, checked the box, much more balance. Altmaier looked comfortable. But then defensively, what I'm really excited to see is now that jump in year 2 for Aaron Henry. I think it was a steep learning curve last year. It's different calling plays when Witherspoon and Sidney Brown aren't there. Now they have got to stop the run. Jaden Daniels is a running quarterback. It requires all 11 guys being on the same page. Can you stop the run without the law firm, right? Like all of a sudden you need guys playing team quality defense. The recipe for a Brett Bielema team is going to be always the same. Can you win in the trenches? Can you stop the run? And can that offense continue what they did last week, which is being balanced and controlling the clock and keeping Jaden Daniels on the sidelines?
Well, they couldn't stop Kansas with the law firm last year. They gave up 7.5 yards per play when they played in Lawrence. Now, it's fair to point out, Andy Koltelnicki was the offensive coordinator. He's now at Penn State, so we'll see whether or not Kansas is able to continue that. Again, tough to gauge given the week one opponent for them. That Maryland-Michigan State game features a dynamic Terps offense that totaled 629 yards against UConn. Tai Felton led the way with 2 TDs, 178 receiving yards, most for a Terp in 6 years, and the most for anyone in the Big Ten on the opening weekend. Also had a 19-yard run. And Tai Felton joins us now for our big interview. Tai, congratulations. Had a really good opening weekend for you and your team. I realize it's early, but leading the Big Ten in receiving yards 1 week in, how did it feel to start the season on such a positive note?
It felt great. Coach Loxley emphasized all last week, starting off like a rocket, having that launch that we should, just being dominant, that we know this offense can be throughout training camp, throughout spring ball, just putting in all the hard work. So it was awesome, and it was a great feeling to see it come out to true fruition last week.
And it wasn't just a great start for your team. It was a great start for you. And it's funny, if there was any doubt about the role that you were going to play in this offense, I think it was erased on the very first drive, right? The first play went to you on a 19-yard run. The first fourth down went to you. You guys converted it. And then, of course, you scored on the touchdown. What does that say, the fact that in those critical situations they were going to you from square one? What does that say to you about the confidence that this staff has in you?
Yeah, it all starts with the belief they put in me. They trusted in me the last 4 years I've been here. They see my growth. And also, I want to thank the team for just how hard they pushed me. And those guys, a lot of guys on the team inspired me to be great every day, like Dante Trader, a lot of the guys, Roman Hemby, a lot of the guys I came in with. So just how hard the team pushes me to work every day in practice, how hard I work in practice. And very thankful for the coaches to put the belief in me they've been showing in my last 4 years.
We're going to talk about the second touchdown. I want you to take us through it in just a second. But tell me about the message Coach Gaddis had for you guys before you went out onto the field for that drive that ended very quickly with that 75-yard TD.
Right. The drive before, we had some of the younger guys in the receiver. Coach Gaddis had came up to me and Caden Prather. He said, you guys got one more drive. And in my head, I'm like, okay, I got to end this drive as fast as possible. So I got the play call. I ended up getting a little hitch route in the boundary, ended up making something happen. Juke one guy, then I felt another guy come and spun off him, and I seen a lot of green grass, so I just took off with the speed I know I have and ended up making something happen.
That's got to be a great feeling when you see that open field ahead of you. 75-yard play there. I would say you did end that drive pretty quickly, got to rest the rest of the way in that game. Obviously, it's going to get more challenging as it goes on for you guys. But I want to, before we talk about Michigan State here, I want to go back a little bit. I think your recruitment is really interesting. Your junior year of high school, you were prepared to commit to Virginia Tech, and then disaster struck. Take people back to that moment and what went through your head.
Yes, sir. My junior year, third game of my high school season varsity, we were playing on a Thursday night. I don't know why the game got moved up Friday to Thursday, but I ended up tearing my ACL on punt return. So going in my junior year, I had around like 20 offers. And after I tore my ACL, I had about all the schools I had backed off me. Virginia Tech, that was my first offer. Obviously, being from Virginia, in-state kid, I wanted to go to Virginia Tech. And then after I tore my ACL, I told those guys that I was ready to commit to them. And they backed up off me because of the ACL. They didn't know how I was going to come back and persevere from that. So as that process was going on, Coach Locks and the whole staff, they were still recruiting me very hard. And I ended up going to Maryland, sticking with Maryland throughout the loyalty they showed me. So that was really big for me.
Yeah, what was Coach Loxley's message to you as he kind of stuck by you where maybe some others didn't?
He's seen the hard work I put in throughout high school, so it was just his belief in me. He saw the little details and fundamentals and how I just went about the game on and off the field in high school, and his belief in me and the whole staff, just how much they believed that I was going to be an even better player I was before the ACL. So it was just belief in me, and it's obviously a blessing in my faith in God. Also, just the mental battles I went throughout that situation, losing all my offers and stuff like that. So it's definitely the belief of the coach put in me, and then my faith in God for sure.
And then you get to Maryland, and man, that was a loaded receiver room when you got there. I mean, Rakim Jarrett and Jayshon Jones and Dante Demas. What did you learn from those guys early on in your career that you've been able to carry forward, having the great success you're having now?
Right, yeah. Coming in, I had a lot of guys to look after. One of my favorite guys was Brian Cobbs. That was an older guy when I came in. Me and his cousin actually went to the same high school, so he taught me a lot of things, how to go off the game, on and off the field, how to watch film, how to eat right, how to recover, how to rehab and stuff like that. So just having all those guys that were older than me being in front of me, it really helped me and turned me into the player I am today, because I watched how all those guys went about things on and off the field.
Let's focus in on the here and now. I want to ask you a little bit about Billy Edwards. It was clearly a battle when we were at camp. He certainly had not solidified himself, at least in our eyes, as the starting quarterback. But, man, he was really good here in the opener. We've all known for years how well he could run it. He threw it extremely well. Tell people something they may not know about Billy, who has persevered, who sat behind Leah, kind of knew his place, and now has seized this moment to become the starter.
Right. Billy, his determination to be great. This how he comes in the building every day, how he works. He's in the building from sun up to sundown. He doesn't leave the building until 10, 11 o'clock at night after practice. So his determination to be greatness, I see it every day. I've known Billy since high school. We had the same trainer in high school. We worked out together. So his determination to be greatness is one of the big things that stand out for me.
This has become a really good program, Ty. You guys have won 3 straight bowl games, 3 years in a row. You've won a bowl. It's the first time that's ever happened in the history of Maryland football. It's a consistent winner, but you haven't had that breakthrough. As you probably know, Maryland hasn't beaten a ranked Big Ten team since entering the league. What will it take to take that next step here for Maryland football this year?
Yeah, for sure. It all starts in practice. One thing Coach Locks has emphasized is that the show is practice and the practice is the show. So whatever we're doing in practice, how hard we're going in practice, it's going to make our job easier on game day because we did it throughout practice. So just making sure throughout the week, Monday through Friday, we're focusing on the small details and fundamentals and it's going as hard as possible throughout practice so we can end up getting those dubs on Saturday.
Well, the next Saturday dub that you guys are searching out is the one against Michigan State, as we talked about coming up this weekend. And you and I were talking down the line before we started the interview of the challenge of preparing for Michigan State, just because they have an entirely new coaching staff. Give us a sense of what you've been able to piece together from the Spartans from that one game and maybe from some other film that you watched to prepare.
Right, yeah, definitely. Those guys having a new coaching staff and it's it being early in the season, not seeing as much film. But their defensive coordinator, we know he's from Minnesota, so we've been able to tag in some film on that. And then I've gone against the secondary a couple times before. We've gone head-to-head, very competitive secondary, very competitive team. So, yeah, just looking back on previous film from previous years and then just gathering as much information as we can from this year to go out there and be highly prepared on Saturday.
Well, can't wait to watch that one Saturday right here on the Big Ten Network. Again, Ty, congratulations. Had a great showing against UConn. Really looking forward to seeing what you and the Terps have in store this year.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Wrap things up here with Jake Butt. Let's run through a couple games tomorrow in the Big Ten. Interesting one for Northwestern, taking on a Duke team that has had their number. Manny Diaz, new head coach for Duke. He's familiar with the Wildcats from his time at Penn State. What will it take for Northwestern to win?
Well, both teams, Duke and Northwestern, were led by their defense week one. That's what you expect with Manny Diaz as a head coach. So I expect this to be a low-scoring, close game. What will it take? They need to tap into that power that they've tapped into every time they've been in a close game. They're one of the best teams. They're 7-2 in their last 9 in games decided by 8 or fewer points. Like, football becomes a self-fulfilling part. You just start to believe you can win these close battles. It's going to be a close one once again this week. They got to lean into that belief.
Duke had 8 sacks and 16 tackles for loss.
That's many. I mean, that's what they do. They're downhill. They're aggressive.
Northwestern's worried about that O-line. This is a huge proving ground for them. Indiana has Western Illinois. Western Illinois has lost 25 straight games. So I'm not sure this is a great test for the Hoosiers. So what can you learn in a game like this?
Well, Indiana brought in more transfers than anyone in the conference, right? So this is just going to be about Indiana at this point. And Kirk Cignetti has certainly been very vocal about his expectations for this roster. So this is about them. Another opportunity for all these guys to get a game rep, to play together, and to put on tape who they want to be for the rest of the year.
I really like this early season schedule for them because for exactly the reasons you're talking about. Like, it just helps to get a lot of guys through to figure out what you've got, and then they head to UCLA next week, which feels like.
And I don't want to play for Cignetti if you're losing. Yeah, I bet he's fun to play for when you're winning, but he's got some juice.
He looked a little pained on the sideline when they were winning on Saturday. I can only imagine when they're losing. We'll see you tomorrow.